Good evening, everyone. Myron, I'm going to let you take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're just going to have our, hopefully not a long rules workshop. We only have a couple of things to hit on today. Before we start, is there anything that you'd like to bring up so we could discuss it over the course of the meeting? All right, then. The first thing on our list for the Rules Committee is we were discussing a rewrite of the Blitz rules. The committee voted, and we decided not to do that. We're just going to look at each appeal case by case and make adjustments from there. Does anyone else have any comments about should we tackle the Blitz rules next term, or should we continue to look at it case by case?
Okay. Well, I mean, the idea of the I'm assuming you're referring to my ADM on rewriting the Blitz rules, right? That's see here. That's
Correct.
ADM.
You did submit something to rewrite the Blitz rules, and we did.
Yeah.
We were discussing that.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, the concept here isn't really so much to change the rules in the sense of like changing how blitz chess is done. The issue is that the blitz rules as they're written now have a bunch of, some of it is differences in blitz chess, but a lot of them are not, and they are things like things from the regular rules. I think it can be very confusing because it can maybe imply like, okay, do the other regular rules apply? I think if you're experienced TD might realize that, but a newer person might be a little confused. And then there's a few other things in here that's kind of confusing or unclear. Like, for example, it says like presently the rules like decision of the chief TD is final, but it doesn't actually consider the reality that you can still appeal to US chess. That's currently in a TD tip. So this would, take care of that. That's one thing this would do. There's some other things that were not entirely clear. So the general concept is just to make it, clearer about what's actually required, and also just keep it to what's different about blitz chess and make it clear that the regular rules apply elsewhere where there's not an exception to blitz rules. And I mean, I'm flexible on the details of that. It's just pretty much the general concept I'm trying to get through. Are there any questions about this I might be able to answer? Or if Micah perhaps.
I think we understand what you're trying to do, but I think our position is you should just do each thing separately instead of us taking the whole thing and opening the whole thing for a general rewrite. If you think the rule about appeals isn't clear, submit that separately so we can take a look at that instead of opening up the whole book to change everything at once.
Well, we're not looking to change the whole book. It's just the blitz rules themselves, and that chapter isn't that long. It's not like we're trying to rewrite like all of chapter 1 or something. It's pretty much a few pages. It's not that long.
Well, you say it's not that long, but it's still a lot of work just to make sure everything's correct. We wouldn't want to go through this thing and still have mistakes in it. So we'd have to go through and make sure things correct. So you say it's only a couple of pages, but for the committee, it's still a lot of work.
Okay. I don't, I don't see entirely how that would take a lot of time to go through that, to rewrite it. I mean, I already kind of did that, and I've been working with, Micah here as well on that. I mean, I did post it in the forums back in May, I think, May, or maybe it was earlier. And there was a lot of comments there that, I changed things based on that. And there's, of course, a lot of experience students there. So it's already gotten a good amount of review. But of course, if there's particular things, anyone on the, committee, details, one things needs to be revised, between now and the delegates meeting, I'm certainly willing to cooperate on that to refine that as needed.
Do we have any other opinions on how we should proceed with this?
I think Micah might be trying to say something, but he needs to be unmuted.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, the correspondence rules chapter and the online rules chapters were completely rewritten, so I don't see why the Blitz rules chapter couldn't be completely rewritten. And the correspondence and online chapters, those changed some of the rules. Here, we're not even changing the rule, we're just changing the presentation of it. And as you said, it's been discussed on the forum already, and feedback's been changed some things of it. And doing it piece by piece, this is going to be a lot more work. It's just a lot easier just to do it in one go.
I kind of understand the idea of wanting to do it in one piece, but this is just not the way to do it. Typically, one submits either small changes, as Myron suggested, or you submit the entire proposal that you're doing to the Rules Committee months ahead, with comments as to rationale and so forth. But anything this long and complicated, to have the delegates as a committee of the whole say, we're going to revise this 3 or 4 pages of rules all at once, is not and should not happen. The reaction the delegates would usually have to this, if the Rules Committee doesn't weigh in on it, would be simply to refer it to rules. And I would suggest that, yes, what you have here is a good starting point, and the Rules Committee, at least not all of us, read the forums. But, this is a complete rewrite. There are going to be unintended consequences if we just adopt it as a whole, which again lends credence to Myron's feeling that we ought to do things piece by piece. So, my comment is it can't be considered as a whole. There are just too many little pieces to it that may have unintended consequences. And I respect the fact that you and Mike have gone over in detail and probably eliminated most of those consequences, if not all of them. But as a member of the Rules Committee, I'm not willing to sign off on that work yet.
Well, that's the problem with the current Blitz rules. The Blitz rules from the 5th edition of the rule book were completely rewritten to basically what's in there now. And there were unintended consequences with that, which made some things not clear. And
well, again, that may have been done number of years ago, and
Yeah, it was a while back now.
that's an argument against not doing it again.
Yeah.
I would certainly like, and I don't know that there's time between now and the meeting, for the Rules Committee to go over, and we have discussed this, and I think the consensus is that we should look into rewriting the rules, or at least the specific items that you have pointed out as being somewhat egregious. But I would rather see that list of which specific items you think are wrong and why, as a starting point. But, you know, we're a pretty active committee. I don't think we'll shy away from a rewrite if we decide that's necessary.
Well, I did send a couple emails to the Rules Committee months ago, and I never got a response. But
Well, that might be a procedural problem. Myron, did we get anything like that?
yeah, I sent it.
Yes, I do get a lot of emails from members wanting to rewrite the rules. I just can't answer them individually. We work as a committee, and anything I say to you has to be approved by the committee first. So I'm not just going to respond to you offhand. Still, we read everything that comes in, and we try to discuss everything that comes in, even if you don't get an individual reply. Anyone else on this topic? Just so members are aware, pending business for the Rules Committee now, we have a vote out on the Channing appeal. We're still waiting for information regarding the Schneider appeal, and I think I just put out a new one today for discussion. So while we may want to look at the rules, that business is what takes priority. So anything else has to be put on the back burner.
So, okay, so I'm seeming like getting the idea that it seems like what I'm hearing is that this is, you know, a good idea, but it needs more time. So if we were like to say refer it to rules, then do you think the committee would be interested in actually going through this and refining it as needed and then bring it back next year? Because
yes, we will certainly do that, but we can only do that when we don't have appeals pending, because that's our first priority.
Okay.
So it has to be in the time between appeals, so we could have time to work on this. And while we're working on changing the Blitz rule, if we get an appeal in, we're going to stop working on the Blitz rules and work on the appeal, because that's our job.
Okay. Well, I would think a year would within a year's time, you would probably have time somewhere between appeals to do it. Would that be likely?
That will be more likely than us finishing up before the next US Open.
Okay. Well, then I would be fine just moving to refer it to rules then, because I mean, I do want this to be done correctly, of course. And, you know, I'm not really the kind of person that tends to favor rushing. So I think that's what I will do. I'll do to refer. And then, of course, while you're having it, just if you have any questions or if I can be any help during that process, just let me know.
I will certainly do that.
Thank you.
I would suggest that Caleb, the motion as a whole has to be referred to rules. There's nothing really else that could be done with that. But if you can find a couple, if there's any specific thing that you think is totally out of line, and I know there were a couple that you mentioned, it would be helpful if you would submit those probably just to Myron as a list of the things we should look at first. And we could amend your motion to say, we adopt this part of your motion and the rest is referred to rules. If there's something very specific and very simple. But anything complicated, I think, would not be done at this meeting. I don't know
Okay,
if I got that right.
I think that's correct. That's a good way to look at it.
okay, yeah, I'll take a look at that. I do know there was the one thing about the making clear that appeal, that you can still appeal a decision from a blitz tournament to US Chess. There was that. So I might bring that up separately. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion. I'll get to work on that.
And the section on draws wasn't clear. It's not clear what draws are exist in Blitz, so that could be something too.
Yeah, so those are things that the rules committee could look at that wouldn't take much time, and we could get that done in its orderly fashion. We just couldn't have time to do, the whole Blitz rules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My biggest fear is when the rules have been changed in the past, there's been a lot of unintended consequences because no one went to look through the rule book to see how this affected other rules. And we just don't want that to happen again.
Absolutely.
Well, to clarify, I think, or at least for the Blitz one, we're not actually for the draws in Blitz. We're not actually changing that rule, or just clarifying what the rule is, or what the intent of the current rule is. And the one on, I guess, and the one on the appeals too. Yeah.
So should I look forward to getting something from you guys about those two issues?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware, we currently have an ADM from Steve Emmett on 2420 defining a win in Blitz. Is there any discussion on that? I know we looked at it in the committee and it didn't come out of committee. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that or anybody supporting that.
Yeah, I mean, I read it briefly. I thought it looked good. The committee didn't like it.
I say we looked at it, I didn't say we didn't like it.
Oh, okay.
There was only one,
We haven't done a formal vote on it.
Oh, okay.
only one member of the committee actually responded to it. And he didn't like it. I think he's here. And of course, Steve Emmett is a member of the committee. So I think we could say the committee is tied 1-1 with 12 abstentions. But be more accurate, there are good arguments for the way it's being done. And there are arguments, Sophia and Steve make good arguments for changing it. I kind of feel that the way we have it in the rules right now has the weight of precedent and history on it. That's the way when the World Blitz Association rules existed, that was their rule. And this was followed. So it's been the rule for thousands of Blitz tournaments. And I personally don't see a reason to change it. But I don't see us. I think most of the committee felt like I do, that either rule is acceptable as long as we're consistent, but I don't see a reason to change.
Um, one aspect of this motion would be there would be a difference between blitz chess and regular chess as to what happens. Player makes an illegal move and then claims a win on time. So, I mean, normally we want the same rules to apply to blitz and non-blitz if it's a sudden death time scramble. But here there'd be a difference. So that might be a problem with the ADM.
Again, that difference is intentional, and traditionally in blitz tournaments, an illegal move loses, period. And which is different from normal chess, even quick chess. However, and different from FIDE, which has yet another set of rules. So the question here is, when there's an illegal move and a flag falling, what is the ruling? Does one take precedence over the other? Can I win on time if I made an illegal move and then my opponent's flag fell? And the argument in favor of that is that I'm sitting there with very short on time, and I'm kind of looking at what moves I think my opponent might make, and I have in mind a quick response, and my opponent makes an illegal move, and all of a sudden my mind just boggles at it, and it takes me 3 or 4 or 5 seconds extra to figure out that, oh, he can't move there. That's why I didn't expect it. And by that time, my flag may have fallen. I don't see a problem with my flag falling at that, of him being able to claim a win on time in that case, because noticing illegal moves is something I have to do on my time. If, as a tournament director, I felt that the player made the illegal move on purpose, hoping it would waste my time, that would be another situation. But I don't think that that's usually the case with illegal moves. The other argument is, though, and I agree with the idea that there has to be a definition of which happened first. If I claim a move, if they happen simultaneously or appear to happen simultaneously, which one gets precedent? That is an important question.
I believe the current language now is you have to claim the illegal move, which means you need some time on your clock.
Right, but if I say flag and you say illegal move and we talk over each other, then the question is, did I have time on my clock? I can claim the illegal move, if I'm not mistaken, even after my time. If you haven't claimed, remember, the flag hasn't fallen until the opponent claims it. So even if my flag fell 20 seconds ago and I haven't moved yet, and I say, oh, that's an illegal move, I win because you haven't claimed time yet. If the flag is fallen after you make an illegal move and we wait a few seconds and then and then I say, oh, that's an illegal move, the game is over, it's too late for you to claim flag. Okay, but the question is that they mentioned, and I don't recall because I haven't reread the Blitz rules lately, is what happens if, and there are other rules in the rule book about what happens if you can't determine whether the chicken or the egg came first. If I yell flag at the same time you yell illegal move, the tournament director can't determine which happened first. What does he do? Even if there was a witness who saw that the illegal move was made before the flag fell, or that's not, because remember, the witness saying when the flag fell is not definitive. The flag falls when the opponent claims it fell. So it wouldn't hurt. And again, this is one of those small things Myron was saying. It wouldn't hurt to add a phrase to the rule to say, if it can't be determined which happened first, then we assume that the illegal move happened first, or the other way around. It makes more sense to me to say assume the illegal move happened first, but either would be appropriate, but we should have such a rule.
Yeah, it says in the rules here, if the claims are simultaneous, the player who made the illegal move loses.
Okay, then I missed that.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with it.
Yeah, 7E.
Wait, yeah.
What's wrong?
I missed that. I thought that was, I read your revised rules and I read the original rules and I conflated them in my mind. Or I thought that was something you added. I didn't realize it. So, I mean, the committee will, Myron, correct me if I'm wrong, the committee will take a vote on whether we recommend any or all of these motions. But we'll, I'll just, a little spoiler here, I would vote to leave the rule the way it is.
Anything will be discussed and voted on before we release anything out to the public.
It's unfortunate that Steve isn't here, but is there anyone who feels strongly about leaving it alone or strongly about changing it the way Steve wants to? Steve and Sophia.
Well, I'm not sure if I feel strongly about it, but I do have a concern that, given that he's saying that if the last move was illegal, that the player can't claim a win on time, seems like there's a big chance of a spectator pointing out the move was illegal. In other words, the flag's fallen, players have both think that the game's over because the flag's down. They're just about, they're shaking hands maybe. And the spectator says, that was an illegal move. So you shouldn't have been able to claim that. So it could introduce some problems along those lines.
Like I said, I tend to like the rule the way it is now. And I don't see a value in changing it, even if probably with a little bit of searching, we could think of of a similar problem that a spectator could add with the current rules. But I don't see that as a reason, either as a reason to change it.
There was also an item submitted regarding what rating system to use for blitz tournaments. Whether it's the blitz ratings or the regular ratings, or does the organizer have the ability to choose either one? Any further comment on anything like that?
Was that just for national tournaments?
Yeah, I think it was.
I believe it was just for national tournaments, but you have to believe if it's used for national tournaments, there'll be organizers that are going to use it for local tournaments as well. So it's not going to be just at national tournaments, you're going to find it all over the place.
I would like to comment that the wording of this motion, this is 2418, indicates that the maker of the motion has a misapprehension about how things work. The organizer of a tournament or the tournament director does not get to choose which rating system is used. If you submit a tournament and you say it was played at game 5 or 3+2, it's rated in the blitz system, period. Doesn't matter what method you used for pairing it. So his whole argument and the fact that he conflates is he presents an argument as a motion instead of a motion plus a rationale, makes it a little confusing. But the tournament, what the tournament director uses for pairing isn't even submitted to USCF with a rating report. You submit the ID number and the rating system looks up the blitz rating or the regular rating or the quick rating or both, or two of the three, and rates the tournament appropriately. As far as your pairings are concerned, as far as the rating is concerned, you could use random pairings, you could use club pairings, you could use any kind of pairings, and the rate that wouldn't affect the rating. On another issue, and this is not a rules issue, this would be more for the rating committee, I suppose, or separately. There are good reasons for national events and other events to use the regular rating for pairing, and in fact, or as I think one of our, as Bob I think suggested, all my tournaments we use the higher of the regular rating and the blitz rating for pairing and prize purpose. And the reason for that is there are a lot of players, there are thousands of players who have a blitz rating that they achieved 4, 5, 6 years ago. There's senior masters with a 7. There's in fact, I know of a grandmaster with a 1700 blitz rating because he stopped playing blitz when he was a kid. Are you going to let him enter a blitz tournament and win the first under 1800 prize? No, you're not. And similarly in National Scholastics, you still get a lot of kids whose regular rating is 500, 600 points higher than their blitz rating. And it just makes more sense to use that rating. So this would be something, what rating to use at the national tournaments would be an issue for, well, what rating to use at a national, at the blitz with the US Open would be probably for the US Open committee, and what rating to use for the blitz at a national scholastic would be for the Scholastic Committee, and what rating to use at a tournament, national tournament that's bid out would be for the organizer. And I suspect all three would continue using the regular rating or the higher of blitz and regular.
Myron,
agree with all-
hop in for a second.
Yes?
Great. So I'm embarrassed to say I actually don't know off the top of my head for the K the spring nationals, grade nationals, I could look into that. It would take me about a minute to Google it. I don't know whether it's regular rating or blitz rating, which is used. I do know though, for the Weir Montre National Blitz Tournament of State Champions at the US Open, that US Chess uses regular ratings. So that is explicitly stated. It's not, I mean, I hear what Al's saying about the higher of the two, but at least as the way the rules are written currently, it's just regular rating. But obviously purely for pairing purposes only.
I believe the Scholastic Nationals, I believe they use the higher of your regular or blitz rating, except an established rating takes preference over a provisional rating. I believe that's how it is.
That's my recollection too, from the last time I paired a National Scholastic Blitz. But that was quite a while ago.
I know that that can be true for the regular tournament in terms of placement. You know, we'll look at variety of different ratings, FIDE as well. I just honestly can't recall blitz. I could look it up in a minute, but just want to introduce that one part that I am certain about for the Weir Montre.
I'm also embarrassed to say, after being chief TD at several scholastics, I can't recall what happens at the blitz regarding to ratings versus pairings. I know there's a long formula and algorithm for placing players in the regular tournament, but I'm not sure how it's done, or I can't recall right now how it's done for blitz.
Okay, it's not published how we do it. But I'm reasonably certain it uses that we use the higher but I'd have to go look at some specific results to figure it out. But in either case,
Yeah, it is published. It's in the Scholastic regulations.
oh, right, I was looking in the Blitz rules. Okay, and what does it say in the Scholastic regulations?
Pairings will be made using the higher of each player's over the board US chess regular and blitz rating as listed in the rating supplement used for the main tournament. Established OTB ratings take precedence over provisional ratings.
Okay, so, and I think that's a good policy. Although the reason I remember having done it is it's a real pain to actually implement it when you're doing, when you're running the tournament. Yeah, it's basically a manual process. The ratings that come in from people who registered in advance are correct, but anyone who registers on site, you have to look up both ratings. You can't just let the system do it.
And I'll also note for the blitz done at the US Open, that is the higher of the regular rating or the blitz rating. And, you know, I'm kind of inclined to think this, you know, the question of how whether you use blitz or regular or both should really probably be at the organizer's discretion.
Yeah, I have no problem if it's announced in advance. If a player comes and plays and is surprised by it, that could be a problem. But again, nobody travels to play in a blitz tournament thinking he's going to qualify for the under 1800 prize, and then finds out he's not eligible because his over the board rating is 1900. And anyone who is hoping to do that, and I have had this when I'm organizing a tournament, I get inquiries. You know, somebody who has a low blitz rating and a high regular rating and wants to play with a low blitz rating will send me an email and say, which rating do you use? And I point to the thing on my website, which tells them. So, you know, I think this whole motion is based on a misapprehension of what the rule is anyways. And should probably be just mooted.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. The motion says it'd be harder to rate the tournament, but it's not. It doesn't make any difference in rating the tournament.
Mhm. It amazes me that, well, I probably shouldn't say this, but most of you. It amazes me that an ANTD who has submitted hundreds of tournaments over the last 20 years, 30 years, is not aware of the fact that that the rating system does not use the rating, you know, that the rating system looks up the rating and that you don't submit it. But
Yeah,
apparently he's not yet. He will be aware after this meeting.
I can tell you the practical problem of this. After being chief of national events, what usually happens is you do get a player that has a lower rated blitz rating and a higher regular rating. They will ask if they can use their blitz rating. It is up to the chief to say yes or no. That gets appealed. So what usually happens is, as chief of one of these tournaments, you spend the entire day with a revolving door of players coming in and out, asking you, can I use this rating instead of this one? That's what happens in practice. You can say whatever you want in the rules, but that's not going to stop that from happening. And it's usually up to the chief to determine yes or no. And I believe that's the way it should be.
I beg to differ. If the player, the rules are very explicit. The tournament director can use a lower rating, can use a higher rating, but can't use a lower rating than the official rating. And if the scholastic regulations specify which rating is used, then the chief TD doesn't have the authority to use a lower rating. And if you or I have been doing this in the past, we were wrong.
Per current 28C, yeah, if it's specified in the advanced publicity, the director can use whatever list they want. Be that higher or lower, or just arbitrarily pick it quick.
You're saying, where are you talking about the rule book rule?
Yes.
No, that's, let me find that.
You're looking for 28C.
It's in the chat.
Right, but furthermore, if you read, and I'm not sure where, it's further down in Rule 28, it specifies that in no case can the director assign a rating lower than the published rating.
Correct. And that's an assigned rating as opposed to using a particular rating list.
It says the rating list specified in the announcement, unless the use of a different rating list was specified in the advanced publicity. So or the tournament director has assigned a player a rating. Okay, so if the advanced publicity, which in this case is the scholastic regulations, says that we use the higher of regular or blitz, then we use the higher or of regular or blitz. Or
Completely agree.
the tournament director assigns a rating that's higher than either of those, then we would use that. And that covers the case of the committee, of the Scholastic Rating Committee finding that somebody has a FIDE rating or a Washington State rating or whatever arbitrary rating they want to use to place somebody. As long as that rating is higher than the official rating, they can use it. But you can't use a rating that's lower than the official rating. And the official rating is whatever you said in your published rules.
Right,
Or-
that's rule 28E1. The assigned rating shall not be lower than the player's last published US chess rating or its foreign or FIDE equivalent, just if necessary.
I agree with that. All I'm saying is that using a particular rating list is not assigning a rating. That is, I see that as a different rule, etc. But I agree with you in
Well-
the general case that following scholastic regulations is the correct way to do, and that this ADM is not well chosen.
Myron, I wanted to ask a question. Are we going to record workshop votes on these motions so when it comes up on the delegates floor that we can then say that this was considered in the workshop and the workshop voted so much, by so much vote either for or against it?
We can do that, yes. I'm not sure how much weight that carries before the delegates, because anything they do is going to be referred back to us anyway. But we could take a poll to see where everybody stands on a particular motion, but just publishing in that I don't think sways anybody's opinion or any delegate's opinion on how they're going to vote. And, if the my belief, if the rules committee doesn't, support it, they're not going to support anything anyway.
It's the way we're doing things now is a little different than in the past. Normally we would have, the rules committee would have voted on this, and and we still will before the US Open. And then this meeting would have occurred the first week of the US Open, and the workshop would have the benefit of knowing what the rules committee decided and why. Right now, the workshop consists of, a few members of the rules committee and a number of people who aren't in the rules committee. And I just see the possibility that the workshop takes a vote saying we're in favor of a motion or opposed to a motion, and then the rules committee comes up with a description of why they have the opposite view. And I think that's, I don't know, that
It's
like I said,
different.
that seems a little backwards to me.
It's different, that's for sure.
But I think this particular motion, if we're going to express opinions, I would move that the workshop rejects this motion as being irrelevant. Again, based on the fact that the ratings used are not the ratings used by the organizer, and there's no actual rules issue involved. 28C plus any advance, or all of 28 plus any advance publicity covers all the situations.
I guess the bottom line is whatever the Scholastic Committee decides, and then what US Chess ultimately decides, because they get to publish it first.
Mhm. It's just not a rules issue.
That's correct. It's not a rules issue. We're not changing the rule book for Scholastic Chess. Is there anything anyone else wants to bring up for discussion?
Myron, I have one thing. It's Mike Hoffbauer. Sorry I joined late, but I was like I told you in the email I sent you, I had to run a Zoom call for a tournament I'm running this weekend and to be scheduled for tonight. So I apologize for coming in late. And I don't know if you had a chance to share what I had shared in the note that I sent you, but I'm also on the Rules Commission with FIDE, and FIDE is looking at some pretty significant rules changes that would probably take effect in January of 26, not January of 25. So right now in the commission, we're basically taking the old rule book and just rewriting it from scratch because it's got a legacy of 30 plus years of subtle changes to each individual rule, and you kind of lost track of where the original rule was in some cases. So that's been the impetus, if you will, the driving force is just to make everything renewed and more succinct. The rules are going to get away from kind of narrative format and be bullets to try to simplify translation into other foreign languages. But some of the more significant rules changes that are being looked at is as a very strong feeling to go away from, if I'm playing Al and Al claims that Huffpower made an illegal move, that Al gets, time added to his clock. It's going to go back to the old way, which was the offender gets time removed from the clock. So that kind of a thing may influence what we do in US chess down the road, just to make things a little bit more consistent. And oh, by the way, one of the big things that's under discussion is if Caleb and I are playing and Caleb commits a violation that's upheld and he gets time taken off his clock, if he has less time on his clock than the size of the penalty, game over. So that is being looked at as well. There's a lot of fist fights going on about being silly, but a lot of fighting going on about, moving with two hands and, castling and capturing and en passant. I mean, there's all kind of things going on, but, those two big examples I gave you, plus one more, there is very likely going to be a new penalty introduced that would probably incur a 5-minute penalty as quote the standard penalty, and it will do with it'll be there to deal with players who are being deliberately disruptive to disrupt the game's progress. They're doing something on purpose to stop the progress of the game, and then the arbiter would have the ability to incur to judge a 5-minute penalty there instead of the normal standard time penalty. But none of this has been codified in stone yet, but those are the kinds of things that are under discussion. And it's just not just the Rules Commission that's doing this. I mean, we've got pretty much the Arbiters Commission is involved, Fair Play Commission is involved, Ratings Commission is involved. So it's got wide involvement from the anti-cheating, I think they call it in FIDE, but that whole there's a very large group of people that are involved in this, and it's multi-committee and multi-commission in nature. It's not just the FIDE Rules Commission. But I think that when the draft of that will probably be published, I'd say probably next summer, so that the delegates would have it, the delegates that go to the FIDE Congress would have a chance to look at it and review it in preparation for the FIDE Congress meeting in 2025, where it would be voted on, and then it would take effect January 2026. I think that's the plan timeline that I wrote in the Rules Commission. That was the plan that I wrote as a project manager. We laid it all out on a map and back planned it from January 2026. But we'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to give everybody some a little bit of advanced knowledge about what FIDE's thinking about, and how that down the road that might have some impacts on how we decide to do things in US chess. So
has it ever occurred to people in FIDE that some of these rules changes they want to roll back were made for a reason?
Yeah. I mean, there's people been on the Rules Commission for over 20 years. So I know they know that.
I mean,
But that's why we're having these discussions is, well, why did we change it in the first place? What generated that change? And that's one of the questions that we're asking, as opposed to, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's just do that, So
I know that I was very happy when US Chess finally changed the rules to be consistent, that all penalties were addition of time to the
Yeah.
opponent's clock.
right,
And you didn't
Right.
have to figure out which ones were additions and which ones were subtractions.
right,
And uh, and the idea of a time penalty causing instant loss of game is very consistent with FIDE's philosophy and not with anybody else's, I think.
well, definitely not with US chesses. So back to you, Myron.
I kind of understand what FIDE is doing, but I am wary to let what they're doing affect US chess rules too much, because there's a reason US chess rules are written the way they are is because of our philosophy and the way our players play. Some FIDE rules can be restrictive. A lot of players don't like FIDE rules and will just bristle because even if we say we're following what FIDE does, they will be instantly disliked because of that. So US chess would have to be careful in how it approaches this.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think that, when things like this get implemented, there's sort of a court of common sense that kicks in. And, so you have a 1 to 3 year period where these things get, arbiters are putting them into effect, and they're US chess. They're also happen to be US chess tournament directors, and that works pretty good. Maybe we should try that. You know what I mean? But there's that court of common sense that has to kick in. And it's just not because FIDE changed something that we change it. That's for darn sure.
I think at the very least, we would have to incorporate any FIDE rule that differs from ours as a variation.
Mhm.
Okay.
I know another one that's been talked about is the is the 2 illegal move loses the game. That one's being talked about as well.
Yeah, and that's a variation. But generally both FIDE and USCF, although a lot of arbiters don't seem to realize this, have a pretty broad acceptance of
Mhm.
published exceptions. FIDE makes the distinction between the rules of chess and competition rules.
Right.
And the competition rules apply to
Specifically for a certain
everything that
event.
they're running.
Yeah.
But anything that's a competition rule, all I need to do is publish that our competition doesn't use this rule.
Yeah, the analog is the Scholastic regs. You got the
Yeah.
US chess rules of chess, and you have the Scholastic rig to supplement it. That add and actually change some things.
Yes.
So and that's sort of that's the analog.
But I recall at one time a very well-known and accomplished arbiter. We got into a discussion about the two move, the second illegal move causing the loss, which at that time the FIDE competition rule said that applied to blitz. And it doesn't apply to a blitz tournament that I'm running, and it doesn't have to. And this very experienced arbiter said, "Oh no, we have to follow that rule, or we can't FIDE rate the tournament." So it is necessary to make that distinction. And as a member of the Rules Commission, I hope you push for things that shouldn't be, for the distinction in rules, so that we can FIDE rate a tournament that doesn't follow all of their rules.
Yeah, I'll be at the Congress coming up where we talk about it.
That's comforting to know.
Another thing I want to do is I just want to say is I don't know if Dave Hayter had a chance to join, but as an executive board member, I just want to thank the Rules Commission, the Rules Committee for doing the work that they do every year. They get these different cases tossed over the fence at them, and they do their best to make heads or tails out of them, and the results we get, in my opinion, have always been very professional and very thorough. And if there's ever been a question, we reach out to Myron and he clarifies it for us, and it's been very smooth operations. And I also want to thank those of you who had enough interest in what this group is doing to join this meeting tonight. So, but hats off to Myron and the team on the Rules Committee.
I just wanted to say that if there's a radical difference between USCF rules and FIDE rules, I think it's going to be a problem for organizations like CCA that have practically half their sections are FIDE rated and half are not FIDE rated. And so it could be that we might have to have either used all the FIDE rules in every section, or at least the major ones, just to avoid the chaos of radical change going from one section to another. We'd have to really look at that. Because FIDE doesn't, I think normally FIDE does not allow variations, but I know Al was talking about competition rules. Maybe we can find ways to mitigate that, but it's going to be a problem. That we're definitely will be interested in looking at these new FIDE rules, try to figure out how we can run tournaments where there's different rules being used in different sections.
Yeah, another one that I remember, as you all know, right now the default no-show time in a FIDE tournament is 0, unless the organizer publishes an alternative no-show time. Typically 30 minutes or 1 hour is what we use in the US. It's appearing as though 15 minutes will probably be the quote default time now. But that's what's being discussed. I don't think it has any serious impact on us, other than if somebody doesn't publish something and instead of it being 0, it would be 15 minutes. But that's one of the ones I just remembered.
I believe most big or competent organizers right now usually publish that their default time is 60 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So the FIDE default time doesn't really come into question. Usually
it's only in the norm. Even in norm tournaments, I've seen it do that.
Yeah. So usually in US chess tournaments, FIDE rules usually don't apply because organizers change what they do in advance publicity.
Mm-hmm.
Our policy is to follow the FIDE rules to the letter in norm sections, and then to apply variations where we think they're possible. An example is pairing variations. And it's difficult, and it took me a while to find the difference because FIDE doesn't separate them, but there are many rules that are clearly competition rules and can be changed, and many that cannot. And that, I'd like to see that clarified, and maybe even in US chess rules, if we ever get to the point of rewriting them. I think that's a very good distinction.
I wanted to point out that at one point, as I understand it, at one point there was no choice in the matter, that the default time was 0, and you had to do that. And the same your cell phone goes off, that was an automatic forfeit. And I think they moved in a good direction in saying something like, unless the rules of the competition say otherwise, because that gives us the opportunity to try to make the FIDE rules match up with the US rules. So I would definitely encourage that as much as we can to have this rules of the competition to mitigate something that might otherwise be a very, a big problem for organizers of FIDE rated tournaments.
Yeah, there's at the time before they added a lot of these exceptions or possible exceptions, I know we in our norm events we followed the FIDE rule explicitly, and in the non-norm events, I guess even in all the FIDE rated sections, we followed them exactly. But even at the time when they were that picky, there were still a few rules that were labeled as competition rules. And it was not that clear unless you dug deep.
Is there any further discussion on this point? Do we feel the need to take a vote on any of this? Okay, I think that's the answer. Is there anything that anyone wants to bring up for discussion or clarification?
One thing I thought about.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, one thing I thought about for FIDE recently changed their rating system, or they adjusted the ratings for players under 2000. So the conversion formulas for FIDE given in the rulebook, US Chess rulebook, are out of date. Is there any plans to update that?
No, they published an update.
But
They-
the US.
Yeah, US Chess
US
published an update in March, 1st of March.
Yeah.
Because
It's
we
still
use
a
it, because we
little-
use it at the National Scholastics. We used the US Chess updated rating conversion formula from FIDE to US Chess.
It's a
Yeah, but in the
reckless-
rulebook-
And we found it's kind of reckless.
It is very reckless. One of our club players is in Paris for the summer and has a 1415 FIDE rapid rating compared to their roughly 900 USCF rating.
Yeah, I do all the I screen. I have an algorithm that screens all of the US Chess ratings and FIDE ratings and Northwest ratings and Canadian ratings and in preparation for Scholastics tournaments. And normally, out of every 100 players in a high school, in the K-12 high school, I'd probably get 5 to 8 players whose ratings needed to be manually reviewed for some reason or another. Now it's like it's almost 30. It's usually 30%. So for every 100, there's about 30 of them I got to review because of the new US Chess formula that's there. And so, I mean, even it's turned out to be, it's not the fault of the ratings committee. It's an issue in the FIDE rating formula. It's that the rating formula, the ratings haven't caught up to what the player's real rating strength, what their real strengths are. The ratings are all inflated now. I mean, there were players that we saw that had 1100 over the board ratings US Chess, and they have 1900 FIDE ratings. So it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, I was getting at the rulebook itself just has the rulebook, US Chess rulebook itself still has the old.
Yeah. If you go to the US Chess homepage and scroll down to ratings, the ratings algorithm paper is like at the very bottom of the page.
Yeah,
On the
I know it's in
homepage.
there. Yeah. I'm just saying
Micah's point is a good one. There should be a motion to just
Change
modify
the
the
formulas
rule,
in the rule book. Yeah.
change the formulas in the rule book, because that is a rule, or my suggestion would be change the rule book to state the US Chess
Right.
conversion formula will be published on the US Chess website.
Right.
And that's a default conversion, by the way. CCA uses a different one. I use a different one. Mine and CCA's come out pretty close to each other, but in some areas, they don't come close to what the US chess rating is. What I found is it's nonlinear. FIDE made an effort to make it linear, but it isn't. And so my formula actually, CCA uses a table, and I use a formula that basically I use 3 different formulas depending on what range the rating is. So, but from a rule standpoint, the formula that's in the rule book is definitely wrong.
Right.
So we should get a delegate motion to remove that.
Same for ECF, by the way. They went from a 3-digit to a
Pardon?
4-digit formula, and that hasn't changed in the rule book either.
And something that was mentioned here, and I've stopped doing this, but I used to submit a delegate motion almost every year suggesting that we change the default time forfeit from 1 hour to 30 minutes. I'm not going to submit it again this year, but if anyone else does, I'm going to vote for it. All my tournaments, I announced that, but my rationale is the 1 hour is obsolete. Everybody has a cell phone now. If I'm stuck in traffic and I'm going to be more than 30 minutes late, I can call, and the TD does have the discretion to give me more time. But if somebody's been sitting there for 30 minutes and we haven't heard from his opponent, that opponent isn't showing up. And it's ridiculous to have him sit for a half hour. I like FIDE's 15 minutes even better, but I'm going to stick with a half hour myself.
There's some people who show up late every round of tournaments, and I find that kind of rude and disrespectful, but
It is.
yeah.
And in some
So
cases,
yeah,
intentionally.
I'd be in favor of the 30 minutes, yeah.
I certainly remember back in March, I was directing at like our state Scholastic Championship. I was, doing like the elementary sections, like, we had, when the time control is over an hour, it's like 75 minutes or whatever. It's like, we have these like really little kids that has to sit there for like an hour, like especially like, kindergarten, where that just seems kind of, not really what we want to do if we want to encourage them to keep coming back. So maybe reducing that might make sense.
I agree that should be reduced or changed for Scholastic Chess. But again, that's not an issue for rules. That's an issue for Scholastic Chess. They can just go ahead and do that if that's what they want to do.
But again, it is something that rules can do. We can make the default 30 minutes. And again, I'm not going to submit it again because it always loses at the delegates meeting. But I'm still an advocate for 30 minutes as the default time forfeit. That I don't care, a kid or an adult, nobody should have to sit for an hour for somebody who isn't showing up, who could, like I say, who has a cell phone, can call or email. Just about every now, if I'm an organizer and I don't have a way for them to call me or email me, then I would announce a 1 hour forfeit. But, I think the default should be 30 minutes. People nowadays can live with that. And everything's faster nowadays. I mean, we play game 90 plus 30 in many places where it used to be 40 and 2 sudden death 1. Everything goes faster. 1 hour is a much bigger part of your typical tournament game now than it used to be.
I agree, and I also think that it has to be done someplace first, and the easiest place to do that would be for a Scholastic change to get players used to it being changed. I think if we try to jump into it, without players realizing that this is better, it'll it'll change because I don't think it'll pass. But if we do it someplace first, and the easiest place will be in the Scholastic regs, that would help.
I've been doing it at the National Open for maybe 10 years. And people, and of course, we get a lot of repeat customers and they're used to it. And new customers just have to learn that.
Yeah, in 10 years, I mean,
And,
emotion.
and that's the other thing, the person who comes 45 or 55 minutes late often falls into the category Michael was talking about of just being disrespectful. And I don't have a problem if a person purposely is 50 minutes late and comes in and finds out that there was a published rule that he didn't read and that he's forfeited. I mean, that's more often than not, that's the right answer anyways.
So if we can get a delegate to submit that motion, we could work on it for the next year or, but I can't submit it because I'm not a delegate.
Well, if we discuss it in the Rules Committee, you can submit it on behalf of the Rules Committee.
Yes, we can.
I think I will bring that up in the Rules Committee. Even it's been a couple of years since I brought it up, so.
I think we approached a change similar to that process last year. We did something we brought up in the Rules Committee and then submitted it as a committee to the delegates. So yes, I think that works.
Well, and at least half the members of the Rule Committee are delegates, so if we were to submit something from the Rules Committee, it would automatically have delegates involved.
Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up? Well, the meeting has, for good or ill, been focused on blitz rules, and maybe that's a good thing. I want to thank everybody for participating. There have been some good ideas. And again, if you want something changed, the way to do that is submit a motion to the Rules Committee so we can discuss it. As a chair, I just can't bring up stuff and hope that it passes. You know, I have to have a basis for doing it. And the basis for doing it is a motion.
I would just add that that's a way for someone who is not a delegate to get a motion on the floor. If someone prepares a motion and sends it to the Rules Committee, the Rules Committee will look at it. And if we decide we like it, or for that matter, if we just decide it has merit, then the Rules Committee would put it on the agenda. But again, that has to be done well before the agenda is created.
Well, you could still bring up a motion at the membership meeting, and that would put it up to be coming up at the start of new business if it passes at the membership meeting.
Yes, but I mean, if you
And
want to.
you don't have to be a delegate to do that. So-
No, but you have to be present at the membership meeting, I guess.
Well, I could present a motion to do that about the default time if that would be helpful. Because I will be there at, yeah, the membership meeting.
I'll jump in with one quick thought, just on that notion. I don't know how I feel about it. I can't imagine we'll consider it for the Scholastic regulations this year. We've already had a lot of meetings on that. Just one thing to be mindful of is that, Super Nationals is in 2025. And though we'll be implementing some changes, like for example, obviously the EB has to prove everything. So let me forget that. Let me not forget that rather. So we'll be proposing some things for the EB to consider. One of them is going back to the Blitz, transitioning all the Scholastic Nationals to 3-2 instead of 5-0. But in terms of the time forfeit, just be mindful that sometimes Super Nationals might not be the best place to start that, just because it's just going to be such a headache as it is, so many new players. So even though it might be a good idea in general, I can see some people, at least on the Scholastic side, wanting to say, hey, let's do that in a non Super Nationals year, just because you have so many people coming for the irregularly, maybe not coming to a lot of spring nationals, and that might not be the time to bust out a completely new change there. Just a thought. I'm not weighing in any preference. I'm just saying I can imagine feedback on that. And if anyone wants to come to the Scholastic meeting, online meeting next week, same time. Actually, I know it's Tuesday. I can remember exactly what time it is, next Tuesday. So it'd be interesting to hear how people feel about that.
I
Yeah.
think it
Go
was
ahead.
8 p.m. Eastern.
I don't know, it's in my calendar, it'll pop up.
It is 8 p.m.
Maybe
Eastern.
The thing is, if the delegates pass this as a rule, it becomes effective January 1st. And if the Scholastic guidelines don't explicitly state something different, then the Scholastic guidelines say that we're following the US Chess rulebook. So if the Scholastic Council wants to avoid this change, they should make sure that if the delegates change the rule, that they change it back for themselves. I don't see that there would be a lot of argument in favor of that. I've been at plenty of Scholastic tournaments, and a kid who doesn't show up in the first 15 minutes likely is not showing up, and some poor kid has to wait a whole hour. That's harder on the kid. I think the injury done to the kids who have to wait an hour is greater than the injury done to the one or two kid who shows up 35 minutes after the start of the round. But again, that's for the Scholastic Council. I'm just pointing out that in the unlikely event that the delegates pass a rule change, the Scholastic Council will have to explicitly change their rule if they don't want to accept it.
And I can say from the point of view of being involved in Scholastic Nationals, it's a complete disaster for the parent. Because that's what you hear.
What's a disaster?
Having the kid have to wait,
Yeah,
that's a disaster for the parent.
yes, the chief tournament director gets to have a long conversation with the parent of every kid who had to wait.
What I'm seeing now is, I don't know if there's something else counter to this, so I'm just reading off the top of my head, or not off the top of my head, but 18-15-1, penalties during the event, start of the round forfeit, no show time must be specified in the rules for the tournament. This can be shorter than in a traditional OTB tournament, for example, 15 or 20 minutes in G45 or G60 online event. The time control is shorter than G20. Increment delay, we do not recommend. a forfeit time or no show time. So it looks like it's just in the tournament rules, I guess. And then I guess we'd have to look at each page. It might be listed elsewhere or something, but that seems to address the matter.
Yeah, it's not listed anywhere else in the Scholastic regulations. That's the only place you find anything about no show
Okay.
or default time or forfeit time.
Now,
But you're right, the rules for the events do all say 60 minutes for the big events.
there used to be a rule, and I think there still is in the Scholastic, with each Scholastic, the rules that are published for each event, that mention that the player who is forfeited is removed from the tournament, and then there was an explicit statement that says he can be reinstated on request.
Yes.
And that goes back, and I was the chair of the rules committee that has to be almost 20 years ago, when a player appealed the fact that, you know, the rule said he will be thrown out of the tournament. It didn't say he could be let back in. And some kid who finished 26th wanted the 25th place trophy instead, because the player who finished 5th was someone who showed up late and was given an extra game and then allowed back in the tournament. And he appealed that to the rules committee. Well, he appealed it to an on-site committee, which of course rejected it, then to the rules committee, which of course rejected it, then to the executive board, which rejected it, and then to the delegates, which rejected it. So after that, and now that I think about it, it might have even been in the 90s. After that, there's always been, and in my own, whenever I publish rules, I always explicitly state that a player who is kicked out for a time forfeit can get back in. So just, and this is one of the reasons why knowing historical, what I was mentioning to Mike, knowing why some rules or some policies are there is important. If people forget why we explicitly mention that, then 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, some kid with a lawyer for a father is going to try and get another kid kicked out permanently.
For the record, I just noted that 18 section applies only to the online national Scholastic tournaments. So it's like one of those things where you do a word search and you're not sure where you are. I'll do another look, but it looks as if there is no mention in the Scholastic regulations for the main tournament, or
Yeah,
rather,
it's just
for an
in the-
OTB tournament.
It's just in the rules for the event.
Right.
I wanted to point out a CCA rule which can mitigate the 1 hour forfeit to some extent. In the CCA rules, the player is half an hour late and has a minus or 0 score, the player can be crossed off the pairing list and replaced. The director can change the pairings to possibly, say there were 2 players in the same section, for example, that whose opponents were late, they could be paired together. That's one way. Of course, it doesn't help if your opponent's got a plus score.
Well, that was the way we used to do it at the National Scholastics. And for a number of reasons, that procedure was eliminated. And I don't entirely agree with them, but the reasons were good reasons. We used to do, well, what we used to do is if we could do it legitimately, if there were
Round one.
if there were in round 1, yeah, this was only in round 1. If there were 2 players, so everybody has a 0 score. If there were 2 players whose opponents didn't show, and it was reasonable for those 2 to be paired against each other, we would then pair the opponents against each other. And if the opponents, if one of the opponents showed up, well, hey, he got rewarded for being late. But the people who showed up on time got rewarded by actually getting a game. And we just got so much blowback from the coaches. Number one, from the coaches who said my kid should have gotten a forfeit and our team needed the point. Of course, they didn't know that till the end of the tournament, but they were complaining right away. And then the other complaint is due to coaches who don't have a concept of the Swiss pairing and don't know how irrelevant it is to switch people by a couple 100 points in the first round. And so the current philosophy is the top half, bottom half, it's almost like the FIDE philosophy. These are the two players who are supposed to play each other, and that's who are going to play each other. And if one of them doesn't show up, it's a forfeit.
Mhm.
And that's not a bad rule. It stops accusations of favoritism. I don't think it stops any actual favoritism because I never detected any, but it stops the coaches from saying, "Hey, you made this swap because you're friends of the coach of the other kid." So, yeah, I like that policy for CCA. Might even implement it in some of my adult tournaments, and in some of my kid tournaments, but it won't work at the National Scholastics. I guarantee it. Or as a general rule, as a rule for everybody.
I like the idea of for the Scholastic Nationals going to 3+2 for all the blitz. Just hope that passes. Hope you guys do that.
Yeah, I've been doing that in my Scholastic tournaments. And when I first started doing it, there was the fear that, the kids wouldn't understand it, that it would be a problem. But for the kids, it's easier than the other way. They like it.
One of the few things COVID helped with. People get used to increment.
Yeah, because of online. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the main for the Scholastic Nationals, is the main time control for the main tournament still going to be game 90 with a 10-second delay?
Say that again.
For the Scholastic Nationals, for the main tournament, it's game 90 with 10-second delay. Is that going to stay the same?
Yes, no proposed change there.
Because I had heard something before that might change, but I'm glad that's not going to change. Good.
Okay, if that's it, we've been on here for, this looks like over an hour and a half. I think you've given the Rules Committee a lot to think about. Again, if you think there should be a rules change, there's a process to do that. As a committee, we're probably not just going to do it on our own unless a committee member feels that it should happen. But I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and what turned out to be a very lively conversation. And I think it cleared up a lot of things for a lot of people, especially, and I got to look at a few things differently than I had in the past. So thank you all for that. With that, I'll say good night.
Hey, John Rockefeller. Hey, I just took a look. I don't have a copy of the 2024 K-12 regulation rules, but I have the 2023, and there's nothing in there about a default time or forfeit time. So we would have to, if it does get changed in the rule book, and we wanted to keep it at 60 minutes in the, or we wanted to, we would need to specify something in the rules for the event. So just keep that in mind. There is no default time specified, at least in the 2023 version. I don't have a 24 version.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm looking at I was looking at the high school page for 2024.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anything. I mean,
Right.
I guess I'll just do a methodical look, but I'm not seeing anything about
Yeah.
forfeit. So I guess in that case, there would just be a default back to US chess's.
That's exactly what it would be. Whatever's
Yeah.
in the rule book is what would count.
Yeah.
Well, my recommendation, and I think Myron will back me on this, and now I'm not speaking as a rules committee member. I'm speaking as someone who has been the chief TD and section chiefs of various national scholastics. I would be strongly in favor of a 30-minute default being put into the scholastic regulations. Myron, I think you would agree with that.
Totally.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the executive board can do whatever they want. So we could kick around the idea, propose it, you know, talk it through, you know, but Mike, if you wanted just to, Dave, and if you guys wanted to insert that and then encourage the EB to vote for it, I mean, I would obviously incorporate that. We wouldn't have a lot of time to think about it now. I guess it's something, you know, it's something we could do at the US Open. Well, actually, only two of us are going to be there. Danny and I will be there. I don't honestly know how I feel about it in terms of by which I mean what I think about it in terms of implementing it now.
Yeah,
The
it doesn't
rules
need,
are
it's
there.
not something that you would put in the scholastic regulations as opposed to at the US Open, y'all can sit down and talk with Boyd about the idea.
Right.
Make sure that there is a default time specified in the rules for the event. And that, you know, if y'all wanted to, you know, look at 30 minutes and y'all discussed it as a scholastic council, you know, and tell Boyd, hey, look, we'll make a decision, you know, before the end of September or something. And
Right.
so
My only thought on that, Mike, is that sometimes I found it odd where sometimes there are inconsistency on the Scholastic pages, so that I know I sent an email about this a while ago. I can't remember which ones, but the tournament rules weren't even listed for
one of the events.
Yeah. And then so you kind of think it'll be there, but then you're really realizing that it's dependent on, you know, the director of events or the assistant director of events updating it. And then even if they're made aware that there's a gap, they might not implement it. So my inclination is that maybe the safest thing to do is do something in the regulation. So at some point, if there aren't tournament rules posted, or there's a link to an old version or something, at least there is, the body's thought about it. Obviously, you all approve it, the EB approve it, or you do whatever you want on that. So my inclination would be to make that change in the regulations. The question is just whether this is the year to do it.
Yeah.
But in the absence of rules being posted, then it would default to the rule book. So maybe it would make sense for us to. But then it could be, you know, it could be if we do it and it's one way, but I think there's a general consensus here that the majority of people present are for it, or those who have spoken up at least. But, you know, you never know what happens at delegates meeting. It might get shot down. And then all of a sudden, well, it's Scholastic one way. And that is a relatively significant role. So we might just want to think about what would be the best way to do it.
That's good. I gotta hang up, guys. I gotta catch a plane at 5:30 in the morning. So
Gotcha.
Okay.